right, let's deep dive into this thriller, The Marsh King's Daughter. It's making some noise, and we've got a review, and it looks like it's visually stunning.
Oh, yeah.
Powerful performances, but also they're saying like maybe some missed opportunities.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if you're into psychological thrillers, especially if you like the, nature vibe, this is going to be a good one.
Yeah, and what's interesting right away is the review talks about this contrast between, like, the beauty of how they filmed it,
Okay.
marshland, and then, like, this underlying feeling of tension, kind of claustrophobic, like, paranoia almost. And it seems like they're saying that, that's kind of a reflection of Helena, the main character.
Yeah, that's a cool point. Like the beauty is almost like a facade for something darker underneath. And speaking of Helena, they are just raving about Daisy Ridley in this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like she really embodies this character who's been through a lot of trauma, but is also fighting to overcome it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they really emphasize that it's not a typical damsel in distress. Like, obviously, she's been affected by what happened to her, but she's resilient,
Yeah, she's got strength.
Yeah.
I've always been impressed with Daisy Ridley. She can be so fierce, but then also so vulnerable. So it sounds like she really went there for this role. But, before we go too far down the road of praising the performances, the review does say that it doesn't really go as deep into, like, the psychological stuff as you might expect. Specifically, the father-daughter dynamic, which is, like, so key, feels kind of underdeveloped.
Well, it is really hard to adapt a book into a movie.
Right.
Especially when it's such a complex relationship.
Yeah.
Sometimes that internal stuff works on the page, but it just doesn't translate to the screen.
That's true. And film is such a visual medium, it kind of makes me think they leaned more on, like, the action and suspense to make it, more cinematic. But maybe that was at the expense of exploring all those deeper layers.
Yeah, it's like almost two different approaches, Is it this heart-pounding thriller or is it this character-driven drama? And it sounds like maybe they don't quite hit that balance perfectly.
Yeah. Honestly, that makes me even more curious to see it.
Yeah.
Just to see how they handle that tension. And here's something interesting. They used practical locations instead of CGI.
Oh, wow.
Which is so rare these days, especially for, like, a thriller movie.
I'm glad you brought that up. That really stuck out to me, too. I feel like that choice really shows, like, a grittiness, a realness, which could make all those survival parts even more impactful.
Yeah, for sure. It's not some, like, polished computer thing. It's, like, the real deal, like mud and water and that feeling of being isolated. It's got to add a whole other level to it.
If you were in Helena's shoes out there and she has to use all the skills her dad taught her, that rawness, the elements, that would be terrifying.
Totally. Maybe the movie doesn't quite nail the psychological depth, but it sounds like it makes up for it.
Yeah.
With these incredible visuals and this, like, unique way of using the setting.
Yeah.
So we've got a thriller that's visually impressive, strong leads, maybe not as strong on the supporting characters, but what else did the review say?
Well, one thing they point out is that it falls into, like, some of those familiar thriller tropes.
Oh, okay.
So it might be a little predictable.
That's kind of a bummer. I mean, you always hope for something that'll surprise you, but I guess it's hard to completely avoid that, especially with thrillers.
Right.
But predictable or not, they did seem to really love the performances, right?
Oh, totally, yeah. They praised Daisy Ridley and Ben Mendelsohn like crazy. It sounds like their chemistry, that back and forth between them, really drives the movie.
I can see that.
But they did say the supporting characters weren't as developed. They felt more like, there to move the plot along, not like real people.
Oh, see, that's where I'm a little torn. Do you think that focusing so much on the two main characters, in a thriller especially, could actually make the tension better?
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, we're so into their world, their dynamic, that we don't even notice the other stuff.
That's a good point. Yeah, you could be right. Maybe by not having too many distractions, it keeps our attention right on Helena and what she's going through.
Right, exactly.
Although I do got to say, I love it when a movie surprises me with a really well-done supporting character.
Oh, yeah?
Who just adds something unexpected.
For sure. A good supporting character can totally make a movie. Okay, so visually stunning, strong leads, maybe some room for improvement with the rest of the cast.
Right.
Anything else?
The pacing, it sounds like, is kind of all over the place. The reviewer said some scenes felt rushed while others dragged on a bit.
I hate that. It's like the movie can't decide if it wants to be like super fast-paced or if it wants to be more of a slow burn.
Exactly. And it takes you out of the moment. You're right there in the story, and then suddenly it's like fast forward or even rewind.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't quite find that balance between those heart-stopping moments and the quieter, tension-building ones.
Yeah, okay, so we got some pacing issues, maybe not the best supporting characters. But let's go back to those practical locations for a sec. That really stuck with me. It's just not something you see a lot, especially for a thriller.
I know. It's usually CGI all over the place, right?
Yeah.
But here, it seems like the director, Neil Berger, was really going for something more grounded, more real.
I read that he's done films like Limitless and The Illusionist before.
Yeah.
And those really play with genre and perception in interesting ways. I bet that influenced how he approached this, too.
For sure. I mean, he's definitely not afraid to take risks and challenge the audience. It makes you think maybe those practical locations aren't just about making it look real, but also about blurring the line between, like, beauty and danger.
Ooh, I like that.
You've got this stunning marsh, obviously gorgeous, but also inherently dangerous. Yeah.
And then you've got Helena and her dad's relationship, which is kind of the same, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Love, fear, manipulation, all mixed up together.
Exactly. It's like the setting is this metaphor for what's going on inside her.
Okay, so even if it's not perfect, it sounds visually captivating, for sure. But you said earlier that maybe it didn't totally capture the book's psychological depth.
Right.
What parts do you think they could have explored more?
Well, flashbacks. For one, they could have really used those more effectively to get into Helena's childhood, those moments that built her relationship with her dad.
Right.
Like, imagine seeing those early days in the marsh, how isolated they were, how he controlled everything.
Wow.
It would have given us so much more insight into her trauma.
That would have been powerful. It's one thing to hear about it,
right?
But to actually see it, to experience it through her eyes, that would have been something else.
Totally. I also think they missed a chance to show us more of her thoughts.
Oh, like what she's really thinking. Yeah, maybe some voiceovers, little bits of her internal monologue as she's trying to deal with her feelings about her dad.
That would have added another layer to her, for sure.
Exactly. It would have made her feel even more real, more human.
So it's almost like the movie gives us a choice, right? Do we just enjoy the visuals, the thrills, or do we want to go deeper and read the book to really get into those psychological layers that the movie maybe didn't fully capture?
It's like two doors into the same story, but they lead to different experiences.
Yeah.
One is all about what you see and feel. The other is about exploring, like, the dark side of human nature.
And that choice itself, it's kind of connected to the movie's themes, isn't it?
How so?
That pull between our gut reactions to danger and our need to understand why people do the things they do.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you're right. It's like the movie's asking us, what kind of viewer are you? Are you okay with the surface, or do you want to go deeper?
And that's why this whole deep dive is so interesting. It's not just about a review. It's about how we connect with stories and the choices we make. You know, it's funny, we always say, like, a good book or movie, it stays with you.
Right.
But this one feels like it does that in a different way. You can kind of choose your own path.
It really does. Like, you can walk away and just remember the visuals, how intense it was. Daisy Ridley and Ben Mendelsohn, that survival aspect, being out in the marsh. Or, like, those things can make you think, okay, I want to explore more about trauma, about identity, about this messed up father-daughter thing that the movie touches on, but doesn't really go all the way with.
So for our listener, if you love a good thriller, like something that really grabs you visually and keeps you on the edge of your seat, The Marsh King's Daughter seems like it delivers that.
Yeah.
But just know that, like, you might want a little more depth when it comes to the characters, especially beyond the main two.
And if you're someone who really likes those complex characters, those relationships that are messy, Karen Diane's book sounds like it goes there. It seems like it gives you that deep dive into the psychological stuff.
Yeah.
That the movie maybe doesn't.
It's almost like the movie's like a little taste.
Yeah.
And the book is the whole meal, you know?
Yeah.
You can really dig in.
What's interesting to me is, like, the review talks about how cool the marsh setting is, but it doesn't really say why it works so well for the story.
Oh, that's true.
Like, what is it about the marsh itself that makes it such a good backdrop?
Yeah. You're right. I hadn't even thought of that.
All right.
Is it because it's so isolated? Or because there's that feeling of danger lurking everywhere? It makes me want to look at how other stories have used marshes.
Right.
And what they represent.
There's definitely something about that kind of environment, beautiful but dangerous, that really gets to us, like our deepest fears, makes you wonder if the marsh itself means something more in The Marsh King's Daughter.
Ooh, like a symbol for something else.
Yeah.
That adds another whole layer. Wow, this has been a really cool deep dive. We started with the thrills, and now we're talking about all these deeper meanings and how the setting plays into it.
And it all goes back to that choice you have as a viewer or as a reader.
Yeah.
Do you just enjoy the show, or do you try to find those hidden things, those questions that stay with you?
So whether you see The Marsh King's Daughter in the theater or read the book, think about those choices. Think about the things that might not be obvious right away. That's what makes a story stick with you, right?
Totally.
And that's what's so great about these deep dives. We get to really break down these stories, see them from different angles, and hopefully learn something new about ourselves and the world. So until next time, happy watching or reading, and keep on diving.